Hi, everybody. Mitch Tanenbaum here. Thanks for joining me today. This is the security news update for January 30th, 2022. As a reminder, there's a lot of ways to consume this content. So one place is you can go to cybersecurity-mitch-tanenbaum-blog.com/SNU for security news update. Click on the month, and from there you will get the highlights and an actual copy of the newsletter. Alternatively, you can go to cybersecurity.us and click on the particular item, and from there you will get the audio and video. And we're also working on a podcast feed, so soon we'll have that as well. So in the meantime, you get to listen to me, and I will try to do this relatively quickly. So in today's news, we have Homeland Security once again warning U.S. businesses with all of the commotion going on in Ukraine and the posturing between the United States and Ukraine and Russia. It is likely that we will see more cyber attacks from that part of the world heaped on us. So if you haven't already prepared for that kind of thing, you should probably do that. The attacks could range from the annoying to the seriously destructive. And I guess this is just a case of be prepared, because there's no way that you really can completely stop it, but you want to be able to respond to it. On the different front, we have Apple updating their personal safety guide in wake of stalkers using AirTags to track victims. The challenge we have with AirTags is they're really small, they're inconspicuous, and if you're evil, you could go stick a AirTag, for example, on somebody's bumper, or attach it to their trunk or something like that, and then stalk them, find out where they live, or where they work, or whatever you want to do. And if you do that relatively quickly, say within a few hours, the AirTag will not start beeping, and the beep is pretty quiet, so you really would have to be listening for it. If you have an Apple device, if it's been there for a while, then the AirTag will put a note on your phone saying, hey, somebody's stalking you. But if you don't have an Apple device, then you won't see that. So they've updated the safety guide. The safety guide is actually pretty great. It's about 50 pages, and it doesn't just talk about AirTags, because obviously that's a bit of a PR nightmare. Get yourself an AirTag, or wait for somebody who's stalking you to get an AirTag and fear for your safety. That's not a great PR move for Apple, but they are talking about a bunch of things that you can do in terms of turning things off and turning things on, and I think that's good. So you might want to check that out. Microsoft is working with Samsung. Apparently there was an issue with encryption certificates on Android 12 on Samsung devices, which is breaking email and also Cisco VPN connections. There are some painful workarounds, but they do work, and both Microsoft and Samsung are working on trying to fix this. In the Apple front, again, there's just a couple of Apple things today. In the Apple front, they are finally fixing a Safari data leak, but not until they got outed by the developers. There is a bug in WebKit that's been around since the beginning of iOS 15, and it leaked data on the Mac and on all browsers on iOS and iPadOS, because you have to use WebKit. It was disclosed to Apple last year, but they were going to ignore it until they got outed. And as a result of that, supposedly 15.3, which just came out to solve another problem, has a fix for that. So you might want to check and see whether your users are getting that. It usually takes Apple a month or two to get around to all the billions of devices that are out there. So if you want it more quickly, you can force the issue in your Apple device. Then the next Apple issue is that Apple has pushed out an urgent iOS update with fixes for 11 documented security flaws and warned that at least one of them is actually actively being exploited in the wild. They never share very many details about things, but what they do say, or what the understanding is, it does allow the bad guys to execute arbitrary code with kernel mode privileges, which is not terribly good. A while back, we used to think of Apple as the secure operating system, but the challenge is these operating systems are very, very complicated, and nothing is going to be completely secure. It's just a real challenge. The fix for WebKit is in 15.3, and hopefully that also fixed the Safari bug, which was already there. So hopefully those two things got fixed. In the Department of Legal Trouble Department, Kronos, who is a big multinational company that makes, well, they used to make actually time clocks, and now they make timekeeping software and HR software. And they got hit by a ransomware attack in early December. The net effect of the ransomware attack was that many companies were not able to collect payroll data, timekeeping data, and therefore their payroll was inaccurate. They did a bunch of kind of kludgy stuff like, well, how much did we pay you last time, and stuff like that to try to get around that. But the effect of that is that they are being sued by employees of companies like Pepsi and other companies. I think Tesla is another company whose employees are suing Kronos, and likely they'll wind up suing the companies as well, because ultimately it's the company's decision as to who they use for timekeeping vendor. The question is, are you prepared for that? As you have all these cloud software products that are really out of your control. Kronos was hit by this attack, or the report of the attack, on December 11th. They think by January 28th, which is about 45 days, they should have most of their stuff back up. In the meantime, people, that's probably 3 or 4 pay periods, depending on how people get paid. And people were not getting their accurate pay. So, whether the states chime in and kind of jump on that or not is not clear. It does violate state law, likely, technically. So we'll see what they do. But I think the moral of the story for businesses is, are you prepared? What happens if one of your cloud vendors, like a payroll vendor, it goes belly up for whatever reason? I mean, do you even know how your employees are being paid? Do you have copies of their direct deposit information if you're doing direct deposit? All that stuff is likely, you're counting on your payroll vendor to have it. And if the payroll vendor can't produce it, then what do you do? On the education side, this is, I think, really useful. The feds have released a zero trust strategy document, and this is specifically for federal agencies, but obviously it could be used by anyone. And this moves the ball down the field towards zero trust, which is really an evolution. It's not going to happen overnight for sure. In fact, in the feds, this document is like a 5-year plan. And that's probably realistic because of all the changes that they need to make. In their case, it's going to be, how do we get funding to go make these changes? For businesses, usually they have a lot more control over funding, so they make decisions. But this thing talks about things like phishing resistant multi-factor authentication, asset inventories, traffic encryption, more stuff. So the agencies, as a result of this particular document, have 30 days to identify a zero trust strategy implementation lead. And that might not be a bad start for businesses as well, who's in charge. In the breaches department, a number of breaches this week, but a couple of them are Open Subtitles, which is the largest company that maintains the subtitle text for like movies and stuff like that. They have 7 million customers, and they finally, after 5 months, are telling their customers that their data was exposed. Why? Because it was put up for sale on the dark web, and now class action is likely the next step there. And the auto parts maker Denso, which is a sister company to Toyota, was hacked in December. And the hackers say they stole over 1 terabyte of data, which, depending on whether it was video data, audio data, or text data, terabytes could be a lot of data. But in today's world, not that much data. They haven't said whether they're going to go pay the ransom, but they said that the computers that were infected, and this is kind of a word to the wise, were part of an old network. And, for whatever reason, that old network was not shut down. but apparently it also wasn't patched. So, I think the moral of the story here is if you're leaving old stuff around, you better maintain it. And better yet, don't leave old stuff around. In the daily blog items, we have a new one more UEFI boot kit, which is virtually impossible to remove. Remember, UEFI is the new secure boot technology that came out about 5 years ago or so, maybe a little bit more. But and what it does is it tries to create a secure root of trust. This particular nastiness, because of the way it works, if you format the disk, it will not get rid of it. If you reinstall the operating system, it will not get rid of it. If you replace the disk drive, it won't get rid of it. The only way to get rid of it is to replace the motherboard or to replace the computer, neither of which are terribly attractive. And because of where it sits underneath the operating system, it's probably really, really difficult to detect. This is like one of 3 or 4 UEFI boot kits that have been revealed lately. And if this becomes popular, I think this is really a challenge. On the legal front, we're seeing a number of attorneys general who are suing Google for tracking your location. You might say, is this really news? Well, the problem is it's tracking your location when you tell it not to track your location. So yeah, that's a problem. And there are several attorneys general that are suing Google. Google has, many lawsuits going after it. This is just another one. The challenge here for Google is if they can't track you, their business model is totally messed up. So what are they going to do? And ultimately, it'll come to some settlement. I'm sure it'll be years before that happens, but at least some attorneys general are working hard to try to get Google to be truthful about what they're doing. On the IoT front, when was the last time you patched your smart fill in the blank refrigerator, dishwasher, oven, whatever it is? What we're seeing here is that IoT things are basically where computers were maybe in the 1990s, early 1990s. There's literally billions of these things, and people just don't think of them as computers, which the hackers say, that's a wonderful thing that you don't do that because it makes their life a lot easier. When was the last time you patched your refrigerator? You probably didn't do it. So the hackers understand that, and they use these compromised things because the vendors are also not great about releasing patches, and the combination of the vendors not being great about releasing patches and the users not being great about installing patches is, when you find out about these vulnerabilities, the hackers say, wow, cool. And then they use search engines like Shodan to find all the vulnerable devices. And then once they compromise those devices, they use those compromised devices to do 2 things. They use it as a launching pad to hack the rest of your network, or they use it as a launching pad to hack other people's networks. And guess what? When they hack other people's networks from your device, it looks like you're the hacker. So, it could be the FBI comes knocking on your door and says, why are you hacking all these other computers? And you say what? So, the challenge here for users is, how do we keep these devices patched? How do we make sure that vendors are actually releasing patches? And I think, from the user's standpoint, what you want is, picking vendors that will patch their devices for a long time, more than just a year or two, and devices which automatically patch themselves. That's probably the best realistic thing. Now, obviously, that auto update process can get compromised, but the odds are that the risk from not patching anything, because people don't do that, versus the risk from the update process getting compromised, I'd say the risk from not patching things is probably significantly greater. And last but not least, we have the security news bites for this week. Number one, the Biden administration is kind of floating a trial balloon to say that they may use the China rule on Russia if it invades Ukraine. What the China rule is what they use on Huawei, that any technology which we create, software, hardware, or whatever, that can be used to help you is now embargoed and you can't sell it. Now, from Russia's standpoint, that could have a huge impact on their economy because they use a lot of American-made technology. And if our partners go off and do the same thing, then that's really going to put a crimp on their economy, which is already not a great economy anyway. There's now something called the Donald Trump virus that has nothing to do with the coronavirus. It has to do with a hard-coded password in a bit of malware that uses Trump's namesake. So far, not a horrible piece of malware, but it's interesting that they picked that particular name to go off and hard-code the password in there. Let's Encrypt on Friday revoked 2 million certificates. Now, they have like well over 200 million certificates out there. So 2 million is like less than 1%. It wasn't because they got compromised. It was because there was a software bug which caused some certificates to be issued that didn't fully meet all of the security requirements. And so they're sort of a little bit weak and might possibly be compromisable. But what the users need to do is go off and request a new certificate. They can do that a number of different ways. The simplest way is to set the clock ahead on the computer involved. It will look like the certificate has expired, and it will go off and request a new certificate. So in any case, Let's Encrypt says that if you were one of the 1% who was affected, you should have gotten an email from them. But if you're seeing some wonkiness on your website and you use Let's Encrypt, you might want to look and see whether you are part of that group. Microsoft has said that they've blocked the largest DDoS, distributed denial of service attack, ever reported. It was over 3 terabits per second. That's a lot of bits. And they've actually had 2 that were over 3 terabits. The biggest one was like 3.5 terabits. And the second biggest one was like 3.2 terabits. So we're seeing some fairly sizable attacks going on here. And that, the good news is that if you're sitting inside the Microsoft cloud, they have, or Amazon cloud or Google cloud, they have enough bandwidth that they can actually mitigate those kind of things. If you're sitting in a data center or you're sitting in your office, you're just toast until the hacker goes away, because there's just no way you're going to be able to go, mitigate an attack of that size. And in the bad news keeps getting worse department, the World Economic Forum says, based on a survey they did, that it takes businesses over 9 months to identify and respond to a cyber attack on average. That's a long time. And obviously that has effects on whether the business is focused on the business or whether the business is focused on the cyber attack. Not a great situation in either case, but you prefer certainly that the business be focused on the business, and we're not seeing that in those cases. So, your incident response plan, how you make that work, that's really kind of the key point there. So if you don't have a well-documented and well-tested incident response plan, you might want to review that. If you have any questions, feel free to give us a holler. And until next week, have a great week. Thanks.
Turnkey Cybersecurity and Privacy Solutions offers the complete cybersecurity program for small to medium-sized businesses. They include everything needed to secure your business and meet compliance requirements. Visit our website at turnkeycybersecurityandprivacysolutions.com to learn more.